This is my first post here. Also, English isn't my first language, but I tried my best. Sorry. First, a bit of context. When I was younger, from 10 years to 15 years, now I'm 19 female, I used to live in a semi-rural area, like small cities with some fields around. During this time, I used to have a best friend that lived in another city, but still close enough so we can go to each other's houses by our own self. Indeed, there was a really long road that crossed both of our cities, and another one farther away, but we both lived really close to that road. We used to see each other almost every day, but my friend Alan and I almost never texted each other, because even if I was a lot into social media and stuff, he was the kind of guy that almost never used his phone. So he ended up losing his phone in his house or a friend's house a lot. So the only time we text each other, it was to warn the other if we weren't able to meet that day. If no one sent anything in the morning or the day before, it meant that we'll still meet each other later that day. If the weather wasn't good enough to stay outside, I used to go to his house. He has better video games. The path I used to take to go to his house was something like 1.5 miles, I think. It was the only way possible because the cities were separated by a river, so we had to pass across a bridge to go from one city to the other. I will describe the path to you. First, there is a lot of houses, then only a few houses and a chemical factory on the other side of the road. Then nothing but trees from my side and still the factory from the other. Then the bridge that is not a really good long one because it's not a big river. On my side, there are 2 paths to go on both shores of the river, where few people used to walk or fish. After the bridge, there is nothing but trees until the end, where there is a warehouse in the street where Alan lives. I took this path thousands of times, with me or my parents or on my own, so usually there's not a lot of people walking there. It never made me nervous to walk there, even when it started to get dark. As I've said earlier, this road connected 3 cities, so usually there are some vehicles driving there. One day, however, something went wrong. The story takes place when I was 13 years old. I was heading to Alan's house as usual, and when I reached the area with less houses, a white van that was coming from behind me slowed down next to me. The window was open, and several times before, lost drivers have asked me or my friends information how to get somewhere. So it didn't really surprise me, and I just watched the man inside of the van. I'm not really sure anymore how he looked. I just remember that he was in his 30s to 40s, bald, and no mustache nor beard. He has a kind of creepy smile, but I didn't pay attention to that. I just walked ahead of him, and I just waited for him to say something as I kept walking slowly. Since I was walking, he moved too, at my pace, so we can talk. "Hello," he said, finally. I said, "Hello," too, waiting for a question. "Where are you going?" he asked, smiling and staring at me. I frowned because, of course, this wasn't the type of question I was waiting for. At this point, I wasn't scared yet, just confused. I asked him why he wants to know that, to which he replied, "If you have nothing to do, I can take you for a ride. Would you like that?" This started to get really weird, and I really wanted him to leave, because I did start getting scared. I chose to lie, thinking he would leave me alone if he knows that someone is waiting for me. So I said, "I can't, I'm going back home and my parents are waiting for me." But of course, he didn't leave. He was still smiling and staring at me, driving at my pace. He just said, "It's okay, we can just do a small drive then." I knew at this point that this man was trying to kidnap me. Or worse. But I managed to stay calm and didn't show him my fear. I insisted, "No, but I really can't. I'm already late. I have to hurry up." But it seems that he really wanted to do whatever he was planning to do to me and replied, "Oh, then I will drive you home. I don't want you to get scolded, but for that you have to give me a kiss." He then leaned closer to the window and formed a kiss with his mouth, waiting for me to kiss him. At this point, we were really close to the bridge, what means that Alan's house was still far. For some reasons, I didn't have the idea to just turn around and run for my life to my house or factory, at least to enter and stay safe. So, I just kept walking and refused his offer. Of course, he insisted, "Come on, just one kiss, right there." I remember wishing that a car or someone showed up to help me, but the road deserted this day. He insisted a few more times, and I kept saying no, getting more scared every time. Eventually, once we were crossing the bridge, I had an idea that what I didn't mention earlier is that on the second shore, there is a house. It's where the person that takes care of the sluice and their family live. Usually no vehicle is allowed to go down on the shore, so I thought he wouldn't follow me if I could go there. So I've said, "No, really, I don't need you. My home is right there," and I quickly turned on the right. However, that was the only half a smart move because except the house, there is nothing but trees and water for almost 3 miles. So if there was no one in the house or on the shore, I would have been at his mercy. Like what if he waited on the bridge and saw that no one opened the door? He could just come down and take me. Hopefully, there was a man walking with his dog right next to the house. I ran to him and immediately crouched in front of the dog to pet him, trying to act like if he was my dad or something. Obliviously, this man was really confused, so I proceeded to explain the whole thing, but turns out he didn't give a shit and walked away before I finished my story. I watched him leave. He was heading up to the bridge, and I noticed that the van was not there anymore. I was relieved but didn't want to go back on the road because I was scared that he was hiding just a bit farther, waiting for me. I stayed next to the house for another 2 to 3 minutes, trying to find what to do now when a white van crossed the bridge again slowly. When I saw it, I got terrified, thinking it was him again. The van was a really common van with no distinction, so I can't tell if it was really him, but they were driving really slowly like they were looking for something. I froze a few seconds and then ran for my life along the shore for a long time before jumping into the forest. I ran something like 2 miles, to be honest. I didn't think I was able to run this much. When I finally arrived at Alan's house, it took me 10 minutes to catch my breath. I was shaking and totally exhausted after running this much. I don't remember why, but instead of knocking at the door, I called him on his phone. Guess what? That was one of the rare days in a year when he wasn't home, but he forgot to text me in the morning. I stayed next to his house for 2 hours. I was too scared to go back home because I thought he was still on the road. But also, I didn't want to call my parents because I was scared that they would forbid me to go to Alan's house alone. I eventually came back home, but instead of using the same path, I went through the forest and walked along the shore for a long time seeking for another bridge. My parents still don't know about this story. Creepy man that wants kisses from a 13-year-old girl. Let's not meet again. So, on paper, this story might not sound as scary as many others, but it scared me for some time, though I have gotten over it in the last couple of months. When this happened, I was 14 years old. I am now 15. So, that for me makes the story even weirder. After the lockdown started, I started taking daily walks down to my local harbor, and since I live in a relatively safe area in Denmark, I was never worried. So one day, I was walking down a side road when I saw a man walking directly towards me. I tried to look down at the ground and look away, as he seemed to be drunk, and I'm not good at talking to strangers. But he walked right up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. Alarms were already beaming in my head, but I didn't run or try to remove his hand. Already then I was gripped by fear. And it wasn't that he was physically intimidating. A small old man in construction worker clothes and a beer can in his other hand. Seeing as I'm quite tall and in okay shape, I would easily be able to get away from him, but I couldn't. He stared into my eyes and talked in slurred English with a heavy northern accent. He was barely comprehensible until he asked me a question. "Are you going out to meet some friends?" That is something you never want to hear from a strange man as a child, and so I was fully ready to run. I quickly answered no, and he simply smiled at me and said, "Okay," and lifted his hand from my shoulder. He began to walk away, but then he turned back to me, and losing every trace of his accent and drunkenness in perfect Danish, "Have a good day. May the wind be with you." We both walked away, but I couldn't shake the feeling of absolute dread. I felt being in the presence. He didn't seem human. It felt cold. I grew up in NYC. I went to schools with uniforms and was used to the usual harassment from grown men on public transit. It gets dark by 4 p.m. in the winter, and I went to a charter school that didn't let us out till 5 p.m. And I had gymnastics practice, so I ended up getting home around 8 p.m. I was on the train, and the carts were fairly empty. When I got on, the only person in my car was an older woman, till a large man came in through one of the emergency doors. People are always passing through those doors. That didn't alarm me. What did catch my attention was that he had a hoodie and a hat on and was sitting in a way where you couldn't see his face, but I could feel him staring at me. I got off at my stop and he followed. I had my phone in my hand and a small knife in my thigh highs. I didn't live far from the station, so I began to walk as quickly as I could. Whenever I crossed the street, he would cross the street. I stopped and I completely went in the opposite direction, and he would do an about face and followed. At this point, I'm panicking. I live in a residential area of Manhattan where everyone knows each other, so I looked for someone I knew, but the streets were empty because it was freezing outside. I went into a grocery store and told them what was happening. The owner sent his son to walk me home. As we were walking, we passed an alleyway. It connects to a system of other alleyways and basements, and he was just there in the dark by the trash cans waiting for me. After this, I got myself a bear spray and a taser.